right, everybody, welcome to the 21st episode of the podcast. This podcast is now old enough to drink, even though technically this probably wouldn't be appropriate for the subject matter of this episode. So we'll just say this episode is old enough to... What else can you do at 21? I guess you can adopt a child if you're from the UK. You could... Oh, you'll have a horizontal driver's license. And what else? 21. I don't know. Because all the examples I have in my head are not good examples. Like, I don't know, messing up your rent money at the casino? Anyway, let's get into it. If you followed this podcast since the beginning, you'll recall that at one point in time, I talked about being the choir director in the very first episode of the podcast. And it's so funny because all of these episodes just really tie together. You know what I mean? Like, it's, while I'm telling one story, it always links to another one, which links to another one, which is exactly what's going to happen in this podcast. So we actually have to revert to a different episode, which was the Smackdown Summer at Grandma's in Savannah episode, where I talk about how I got shipped away to Savannah, Georgia, because my mother was under the impression that I was this wild, out-of-control teen. We had literally one argument, which really wasn't an argument. It was more so me just saying my 2 cents because I was frustrated with a few things, and at that moment, my mother had never seen that side of me, so to her, that translated into I was one of the characters from Juice or Boys in the Hood or South Central or Minister Society, and I was going to be in a gang, and I was going to do drive-bys and rob banks and do hate crimes, and so I got shipped off to Grandma's in Savannah, which for me was like a reward, because at the time, like I said, Savannah was and still is one of my favorite places to go. It's the only place right now that I have that is it's still a consistent, ever since my father passed, I've always felt kind of uprooted because, of course, I live in Washington, D.C., and my mother ended up selling the house that we grew up in, and she moved to Atlanta, and then my brother, because he was in the military, he's been living all over the country, so I no longer have any actual ties to Washington, and the only thing that's always been the same was Savannah, because being a military child, we moved around a lot, and then, of course, with me going to college and living on the other side of the country in my career and everything like that, the only thing that's always been the same since I was a baby is Savannah. Everything else has always changed as far as what we would consider calling home. So for me at the time, it was great to go to Savannah. I love going to Savannah, get to hang with my cousins. Grandma was fun. I loved being around black people, like all of that. So there was that. So backtrack, it is August of 2005, and I've just had the best summer ever. It was lit. Every day it was a new experience, a bunch of laughs, a bunch of fun stuff to do. It was just a great time. And now it's actually time for me to get back on the plane and go back to Spanaway, Washington. And it will be a little bit different when I get back this time because my father is back from his job assignment. Because at the time, he had been living either in Alaska, Germany, or Texas. I can't remember which one of the three, but he was at one of them. His job always had him moving everywhere. I want to say he was in Alaska. And so my father's home now, so it's going to be some changes around this house. Ain't going to be no attitude and opinions and talking back. That's a wrap right then and there. They had already let me know before I even got on the plane what was going down when I got home. I was like, dang, I don't even want to go home. I'm going to get fussed at all day. However, I actually was still excited to go home to an extent because there were some things I was looking forward to. One, it was about to be my senior year of high school, and I had been elected student body president, so I was looking forward to doing that. I had missed some of my friends from back home. I finally was going to be able to drive my car. If you've heard that episode about me having to wait 2 years to drive the car because my parents thought I was a crappy driver, so I would walk past my car every day for 2 years to the bus stop and get on the school bus and go to school. But yeah, I missed some of those things. They didn't have Jack in the Box on the East Coast, which is still my favorite fast food establishment. I'm not gonna lie, I really wish they would bring Jack in the Box over to the East Coast the same way they finally took Chick-fil-A over to the West Coast. Like, man, because listen, Jack in the Box might be the only fast food establishment that actually uses real eggs in their breakfast sandwich. I know McDonald's does it with the McMuffin or whatever, but I'm just saying, Jack in the Box just hits a little differently for those who like it. So there were a bunch of things that I was excited about, but I also was excited about going back to the church we went to, mainly because the church was actually fun. A lot of teenagers can say they don't like church, but I actually liked going at the time because, one, I really enjoyed the music. Like, the music was always really, really good. Same with my grandma's church in Savannah. They always had a really great choir at the time when we went there as teenagers. It was this really huge choir. And I mean, they would just sing the roof off the place. And same thing with Maranatha. Maranatha it was a smaller church. It had a smaller choir, but the music was just as impactful. And I mean, it just sounded good. The pastor could sing. And then like the whole family, all of them could sing. The mama, the daughter, like all of them. And then there were a bunch of other people in the choir that could sing. was just a fun, church was fun. We was in it a little too long, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the music part. Like, that was always the one thing I've always had an appreciation for. If you follow me, we always talk music on my YouTube channel, and I always talk about R&B, but I have a huge appreciation for gospel music as well. Like, gospel, I think, pretty much is rooted in even the sound that I make with my own music. There's lots of things that I kind of, you learn over time unconsciously when you grow up in the church, and you don't even realize you're doing it until you actually go and you put it into production. And I'm like, you got that idea straight out of the church, you heathen. So fast forward, I'm back in Spanaway, been there a few days. I'm actually kind of pissed off and miserable because I'd rather be in Savannah, because I've just been getting fussed at the whole time I've been home. My parents are finding everything to fuss about, and it's like a tag team 2-for-1 special, because like I said, my dad is back from his government job assignment, so now it's both of them home, so they just feed off of each other. Because one thing in my house, if my dad got the fussing, my mother would always echo what he said, and it was like a tag team. I'm like, man, so if my dad said something, didn't I tell you to cut the grass? My mom would jump right in. I told him, but you know what, he was on that phone all day. I'm like, dang, man, mama, okay. And so he's fussing. I thought I told you to clean out the shed. Yeah, you told him to do that back in May. He done went to Savannah, didn't even do it, come back and still ain't done. I'm like, Mom, okay, relax. And then she gets to fussing, which one of y'all ate my lean cuisine? And I'm like, Mom, I'm already skinny, so it's unlikely that I'm gonna eat the lean cuisine. I'm already self-cautious about being so skinny, so I'd probably eat something with some actual calories in it, okay? Get off of my back. It's kind of like Shanae and Martin. Jada, get off of my back. That's what I felt like. Anyway, so it's finally Sunday, and even though I always liked the musical selections at church, I never liked the process of getting up and actually going to church. The only reason I liked the music was because at that point I was already there. If I had a choice as a teenager, I would have never gone to church. I'd stay home and mind my business. But not in this house. Everybody goes. And so the process of getting up for church used to be it was gruesome, because I don't know if you're like me, but on the weekends when you don't have to go to work or go to class or go to school, or you have that day off, and even if you're going to something like church, I still like to ease into my morning. Like, I like to let the sun wake me up, and I like to move as slow as possible and do whatever, and then finally get into a groove around 9:45, 10 o'clock. Even today, now naturally I wake up at like 7, whether I want to or not, but even then, I'm not doing anything until after 9. I'll lay in my bed for 2 hours scrolling on social media. But anyway, my mother would just wake us up at like 8 o'clock, and she'd just be nagging the whole time. Because for her, going to church was like, I don't know, it was like, to her, it was like performing halftime at the Super Bowl. It was a big deal. Come on, y'all, get up, let's go. You need to iron them clothes, something, because when it's time to go, I'm not waiting for nobody. We gonna all be on time. And so she'd be fussing, and then of course I'm trying to fix breakfast and make sure Marcus got something to eat. Y'all should have already ate already. Let's go. Get in the car. Y'all taking too long. And you gotta iron your clothes and everything. And so the process of getting ready for church in the morning would just be, you just didn't enjoy it. And then the funniest part, my mom would always be the last one ready. Every time. Like, as men, it's a house with 1 woman and 3 men in the house. Me, my brother, and my father. 3 of us. Men, we don't take too long to get ready. And this is before I had hair again. I grew my hair out for the second time. So yeah, you don't have to do too much in the morning. But my mom would always be the last one ready. And then talk trash when she was finally ready to go. All right, let's go. We need to go. Let's go. And I'm like, we've been sitting down waiting all day. I done ate about 8 peppermints out of your purse while I was waiting. What you talking about? So we get in the car and we're on the way to church. I'm actually excited because it's like, okay, we're on the way to Maranatha. I'm about to see all my old friends again. The only thing I also hated about getting ready for church, so there was this radio station, I don't know if it's still there, but it was 1560 KZIZ, an AM station, and it was like a gospel radio station. And so my mother, I love her to death. I really love this woman so much, but my God, the music selections in the car sometimes would drive me crazy, because my mother is easygoing. She can play like the same CD for 8 months in the car and be just fine. Me, I got my iPod with like 40,000 songs in it, and even with a million different playlists that I've created, I'm still driving and skipping and skip. I want to play. I want to hear this version, or I'll hear a song and I'm like, oh well, I want the live version. And of course, because I'm such a music dork, I've ripped the live version off of YouTube and made a live playlist. So let me play the live one. Like, my mind has to stay stimulated in the car with the music. My mother, on the other hand, now she can. My dad too. They both can play the same song for weeks at a time in the car, and it's just fine. And so a lot of times the option was whatever CD was on in the car or 1560 KZIZ, and I would rather, honestly to God, just hear the CD as opposed to 1560 KZIZ, mainly because there was this woman that used to host the radio. Her name was Bonnie D, and Bonnie D talked like 3 or 4 words a minute, and she would go and do her radio show, and the radio show was called The Heaven Bound Train. And this is Sister Bonnie D, and you're listening to the Heaven Bound Train. And she'd get to talking, and she'd say, right now we're gonna have a few moments for people to call in and put in prayer requests for people to pray for their family, and then we're gonna go to commercial. But before we go to commercial, let me go ahead and play this Walter Hawkins song for you all. And then she push play. Oh, you know what? I done pushed the wrong button. This isn't Walter Hawkins. This is for the next show. Well, let's just go to the phone lines. I'd be in that car like, kill me now. Kill me now. Eventually, I started making my parents some little mix CDs or something, because I was like, listen, I need us to just up the ante with the music selections in the car, folks. Now, mind you, 1560 was cool after Bonnie D's show went off, but in the morning, when you're going to church and you're already kind of dead to begin with, you need something to kind of wake you up. And they should have put her in like the quiet storm hour. She could have worked then, because that's kind of ease into your sleep. But to try to wake and start the day up, I'd be like, Bonnie, come on now. Goodness. But anyway, so we're right into church, and I noticed we go a different route. And I'm like, because the church, Maranatha was about 20 minutes from our house, because we lived in Spanaway. Maranatha was in Tacoma. And for some reason, we're almost in Lakewood, which we're like right on the border of Lakewood and Tacoma. And I'm like, well, there must be a new route to the church. And so we go, and we're riding in the car, and we pull up to what looks like a house. And I'm like, oh, well, who are we picking up? Who's here? And ain't nobody saying nothing. Me and Mark was looking at each other a little sideways. I'm like, whose house is this? Who are we picking up? And then I look, and I noticed that there's like a church sign. I'm like, wait, is this a church? Wait, what is this? What is this? What? Oh, this, they must be picking somebody up, because I know this is not where we're going. And then we get into what is the parking lot. I'm like, why are we parking? And they turn the car off, and I'm like, excuse me, people. I know you people hear me. What are we doing here? And my mom was like, this is the new church we go to. I'm like, excuse me? This is the what? Because one thing that my parents always did, we always went to smaller churches. Like Maranatha at the time, Maranatha was the biggest church we've ever gone to as a family. That church had about 200, maybe 300 members. We went to a church called Lively Hope before, and at the time, Lively Hope had maybe about 100 folks. When we were in Italy, the Vicenza Gospel Service Church, it was the only church you could go to, but that church had about 150 people. And so now we're at this church, and it looks like a 3-bedroom house. And I'm like, y'all somehow managed to find the smallest churches every time. You will find a storefront church if it kills you. And so, we find this church, and I'm like, when did we switch churches? And why did nobody tell me? And I'm literally getting pissed off, because I'm over here thinking like, I know this. What? Why? And mind you, I just came from Savannah too, and my grandma's church was cranking and rocking. And then my best friend at the time, they went to this church called St. John Baptist Church in Tacoma. And at the time, St. John was like, there were a few churches that were like the say-all, be-all churches to go to, because the choirs are really good. So it was like St. John, it was True Vine, God, I'm forgetting some of these names. It's been so long. But anyway, so I'm thinking like, I can imagine what it's going to sound like in this little church. And so we go, and I got an attitude. I do not want to be there. We go in there, we walk in, and then I realize they're serious. This is where we're about to go. And at the time I was like, well, maybe it's just like a special service they're having. And, sometimes the churches get together and they do a joint service or something. It had to be that. Couldn't be what I think it is. But we walk in, and they're in Sunday school, and I don't recognize anybody, and I don't see anybody from Maranatha in here. So I'm like, okay, actually, no, I think they're serious. We're really going to this church. Now, mind you, the people at this church were very nice people. But as a 17-year-old who just came back from the most fun summer ever and had to come back home and get fussed at every day, and now I don't even get to go to the fun church either. We got to go to some church where I don't know anybody, and it's like 10 people up in here. Why? And so they go to Sunday school, and I meet who the pastor is. Pastor's cool, but again, I'm still in what the heck mode, so I'm not feeling anybody. I'm not having this. They're gonna catch it in the car in my head, because I'm not gonna talk back. I'm gonna just talk trash in my head the whole car right there, and it's gonna show on my face. And so, I meet the pastor, and he's like, well, how old are you? And I'm like, well, I'm 17. He's like, oh, great, now we have enough for a teens class. I said, excuse me? Y'all don't even have teenagers in here? I'm the oldest one? It's just me? Oh, God. Why hast thou forsaken me? So I sit down in what would be the teens Sunday school class, and it's just myself and the pastor. And I'm sitting here like, this is really awkward, because at least at Maranatha, we had at least about 15, teenagers in the class. And, I could joke with this person. And, again, like, I had a lot of friends over at Maranatha. And mind you, Maranatha was just 10 minutes down the road. So I'm like, I'm over here pondering, like, I should be able to drive soon, so maybe they'll let me just drive to Maranatha, because this ain't gonna be it. I'm not about to sit here with this one-on-one type of Sunday school scripture stuff every day. And out of nowhere, the pastor goes, Kim, get over here. You're in the teens class now. And so I see this girl who looks like she's about 10 come over, and she comes and joins the group. And so she happens to be the daughter. Now, mind you, I've changed all the names in this story because these people are still somewhat around and in my life. And so, yeah, whoever's listening, I still love all y'all, but this is my story, so I get to tell it. But anyway, so she comes over. So she's actually about 12 going on 13. And I'm like, you know what? Okay. I just have 1 year left of this. I'm gonna go to school soon. It's okay. I'll be off from college, so let's make the best of this. So I'm sitting in a Sunday school class, and I'm totally spaced out because I'm pissed off. Like, they really switched churches and didn't even tell me. And then, like, y'all didn't even go to one of the fun churches. Y'all went to a smaller church. And, my brother on the other side, I can see him in his class because my brother at the time was like maybe 9, and so he's in like the younger kids class. It was like 4 or 5 of them over there. So my brother, like I said, my brother is the most sociable person you will ever meet. I don't know how you can't get along with him because he gets along with everybody. Everybody loves him. Sometimes I wish I had that gift of communication that he has, because he can make friends with anybody. Me, I'm like, I'm good over here. I'll be all right. Thank you. And so, Sunday school ends. The church service goes. The service isn't too bad. The one highlight was that we were out of church at 12:30. Church service was over exactly at 12:30. I said, oh, okay, all right. Because look, Maranatha, as much as I love it, we be in there till 2 o'clock sometimes. I'm like, dang, man, y'all, we've been in here so long. Jesus has left the service and went to lunch. Like, Jesus has stuff to do. He can't sit in here with us all day. He got stuff to do. Holding that man hostage. Now, during the service, there was one portion where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try to give all of this a chance. Let me just be open-minded here. I will get over my initial shock eventually, but let me ride this out and see how, at least, maybe the music selection is good. But as I was looking over to the corner where the musicians would be, I just saw the guy on the organ, and I saw this kid on the drums, which fortunately, he was another teenager. He just happened to come a little bit later after Sunday school. So I was like, okay, well, he looks about my age, so maybe me and him will be tight, hopefully. And so, it's time for the choir selection. And then it turns out they don't have an adult choir. It's kids choir. And it's kids choir every Sunday because they don't have an adult choir. Not even like a combination choir of the adults and the kids together, just the kids. I was like, oh, okay. Not bad, because you know what? When I was, when we lived in Italy, I was in the kids choir in Italy, and I was in the Sunshine Band in Maranatha, and I was in the kids choir when we went to Lively Hope. Okay, this could be a thing. Kids can't really, kids might be okay. And so the kids go and they sing, and it's actually okay. It's all right. I'm not gonna diss the kids. Plus, at the end of the day, the one thing about church and music and all that is it's supposed to kind of uplift and bring praise and everything. It's not for entertainment. But at the time, I'm thinking as a 17-year-old who already has a short attention span and needs to be entertained if you're gonna get me to sit in here for 2 hours. And so, the kids, they do their portion. The service ends. And there's a part where, at most churches, they do like an altar call or like a call to join or something like that. Like after the service, they've done the prayer and everything. And they're like, is there anybody who would like to join this church? And so the pastor does that. Now, mind you, in this service at the time, there's about 25 people in here. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, I feel like we're the only visitors today. I hope they're not talking to us. And so like, is there anybody who would like to join this church? And then Mom whispers to Marcus, and then Marcus whispers to me, and Marcus is like, Mom said, do you want to join this church? And I'm like, no. And so, and I watch Marcus give the message to my mom, and my mom gives it to my dad, and then my dad looks at me, and then stands up, and he's like, y'all get up here. I'm like, oh God. And so we go to the altar, and the whole church is clapping like, yeah, and they, we join in the church. And so my parents introduced themselves to everybody, because they've already been going to this church for the longest, but I guess they didn't want to do the official, joining of the church until the kids were back from their summer trip in Georgia. And so, they're saying all this stuff, and this is my son Marcus, and this is my son Michael, and he's also an usher, and he also sings. And I'm looking like, Mom. Now, mind you, when we were at Maranatha, I was not in like the main choir. I only did the Sunshine Band as a kid, and as I became a teenager, I wasn't in any of the choirs. So I'm like, I haven't been in a choir in like 3 or 4 years. The look I gave my mom on the altar when she said all that, because here's the thing. When you go to a smaller church, especially a church that has less than like 50 members, Everybody participates. Everybody has a job. Everybody got to do something. This, and some churches that are small like that, they'll say, let's give it up for the choir, and then the whole church go up there except for 3 people. And it'd be like 30 people singing to 2 folks in the sanctuary. And so I was hot because I was like, you just set me up here, because this means I'm about to be on the usher board. I'm about to be in the choir. They're going to have me doing everything. I was pissed. It was a struggle. I was hot. And then to make it worse, we get in the car, and my mother and father are trying to get me to buy into all this because they know that I'm mad. Like, they know I'm pissed. Like, why? And so my mom was like, oh, well, Marcus, how did you like the church? And Marcus goes, I liked it. I made 7 new friends. And I'm in the head counting like there wasn't but 5 kids in Sunday school. So how you make 7 friends unless you're making friends with the adults? You're over there lying. It turns out my mother gave Marcus $5 to say that in the car. I didn't find that out until a few years later. But I'm like, you know what? All y'all are in on it. All y'all are fake. All y'all fake. Fake. And so we joined this church, and over time, the experience actually does get better. And, I start to find my footing in the church. And mind you, it was a little different too, because I already knew I was going to be leaving for school. Like, I already had mapped out what I was going to be doing in life. This is when stuff still made sense at the time. This is before life really hits you, where you think you can just plan everything and it will go to plan. At the time, everything was still going to plan. It was like, all right, I'm about to either go to Morehouse or Howard. I'm going to apply in the fall. I'll find out before the new year, and then I just got like 5 more months after the new year and I'm out. So it's cool. I'll do this church thing. I can keep up with all my friends from Maranatha on MySpace, because that's what was jumping at the time. And, I'll hang out with some of them when I can. It is what it is. So let me make the best of this. So one day we're at church, and this is a few months later. We're at church, and at the end of the service, the pastor goes, we'd also like to thank the so-and-so family, my family, I just don't want to give y'all my last name, because, they have decided to spearhead putting together an adult choir. And then everybody starts clapping, and then there's this woman named Sister Regine, who is the director of the kids choir. She gets excited. Yeah! And everybody's excited, and I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, who? You talking about my parents? They putting together a choir? And so I'm thinking, because my father, like I said in the podcast, if you heard the episode where I talked about his passing and how he had started his own men's choir before, I talked about how my father is not really a singer. He's not musically inclined. He has a decent falsetto. He has an okay head voice, but he's not musically inclined. He loves music, or he loved music. He had a great ear for music. He was not a singer. If you were to coach him all the way through a song, he would do okay. But the minute you put him there on his own, you don't know what key he's gonna be singing in. He's gonna be singing in the key of struggle for real. And my mother, her and all of her sisters could all sing. But she never really was one to really be in the choirs like that. She was in if they did like a special women's choir, especially like when we were at Maranatha or when we were at the church in Italy, she would do that, but she was never really in the choir. It was always me who was the choir one, and sometimes even Marcus. And so I'm thinking, how is this gonna work? And so my parents in the car like, oh, Michael, you gonna be the choir director. Excuse me? I know you've always told me not to play my music too loud because it may damage my ears, but if I heard correctly, I thought you said I was going to be the choir director. Is that affirmative? Yes. What? Why? I don't want to be the choir director. What? Y'all put that together. First of all, why? I don't want to do that. And I was pissed because it was like I already had too much stuff I was doing personally. Like, at school, I was student body president, so of course, whenever there was a big school event or something, I had to stay after. The school would do lock-ins and all kind of things. I was doing that. I was doing track. I was on the dance team. And with the dance team, because we traveled and we did competition, there would be some Saturdays where I'd be like going for like 10, 11 hours because the competitions were long. And then there was a lady named Miss Redmond, and I was a part of her dance troupe, and so I was doing that. And then I was in Key Club, which was like a volunteer service. And what else? And then I was on the usher board at the church, and then I still had somewhat of a social life. And I'm like, I don't have time to direct the choir. I don't want to do that. And my mom was like, you know what? Because you always running your mouth, you're always talking trash, you think you're Quincy Jones, so we gonna see if you can bring it or not. So you gonna be the choir director because you always got something to say about everybody in this church. So you know what? I'm gonna give you the opportunity for people to say something about you. So you better not mess this up. And your first choir rehearsal is on Saturday. Huh? What? Wait, the choir rehearsals are gonna be on Saturday? Yes. It ain't like you got nothing to do. You don't work, and you don't got nothing to do unless we say you got something to do. And so the rehearsals are on Saturday. And I was pissed because most times you do like a choir rehearsal on like a Tuesday night, Wednesday night. My parents were like, nope, it's gonna be Saturday morning, and it was Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And the practices will be 1 hour. I was like, oh, okay, well, 1 hour, not bad. Okay, I'll take it. But I was pissed. I was like, y'all done set me up. This was the ultimate karma for all the trash talking that my brother and I would always do, because my brother would flame the mess out of the kids choir, because there were so many funny stories out of just those kids. And then I used to always talk my trash about people when they would get up and sing during like the praise and testimony portion of the service, especially when this lady, Sister Tippa, would get up and sing. Because mind you, Sister Tippa was like, one, she was very, very tall. Let me tell you how tall she was. There was another member at the church, Miss Gertie, who got married. And like I said, the church pretty much was like a house that was gutted out and turned into a church, so the ceilings were low. Now, Sister Tippa, she had at least be 6'6", 6'7", had to be, because she was taller than my father. She was the tallest one in the church. And so the day of the wedding, she was the bridesmaid. Or maid of honor. She was one of the things. And so Sister Gertie, that wedding was already funny in itself, because Sister Gertie had made her own wedding dress. And mind you, Sister Gertie was a lot older. She was probably in her 50s or 60s, and Sister Tippa was in the same age range. So Sister Gertie had made her own wedding dress, but she didn't finish it in time for the wedding. So the bottom of the dress was finished. The white part with all the big, the big poofy things that the brides wear. That part was done, but the top was not. So she just put a white sweater on top of the bottom half. So it's this white sweater with these little purple streamers hanging from it, and then the white dress. And so that was the wedding dress. So she's in her wedding dress, and then Sister Tippa's supposed to walk down the aisle. Sister Tippa starts walking with the flowers, because the wedding party comes first and then the bride. Sister Tippa has on heels, and she has this high braided ponytail. There's ceiling fans in this church, and the ceiling fans are on. And when she's walking, I don't remember the song they were playing, but you just hear while she's walking, and so her hair hits the ceiling fan. It doesn't get stuck, but it stops the fan. And then like if you have a ceiling fan that you haven't dusted in a while, she just hit the ceiling fan, like the top of her head did. All the dust is falling everywhere. I'm in stitches in that row holding it together. My mom is elbowing me so hard, like, shut up, shut up, shut up. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, I could not stop laughing. But anyway, Sister Tippa was very tall, but she loved to sing, and she had a big voice. And it was okay. It wasn't a bad voice, but the problem was she'd always want to do too much and do 850,000 runs every Sunday. She was going to sing. And I love this lady to death, but my God, when she would sing and have the words wrong. And again, I said she'd always do the most. And she'd always sing the same song. She'd always sing His Eyes on a Sparrow, but then remix the words. Because some folks, when they sing, they remix a song to death. So she would go and, what should I be? I'm like, be? Huh? Discouraged. I'm like, oh my God. What? Should I shut up? I'm like, oh Lord. And then she would get louder, and this song would be for about 5-6 minutes. And this was every Sunday. So it was hilarious the first 10 times, and after a while you're like, okay, here she go again. All right. But you don't want to take away the blessing that she has for herself, so let her go on and sing. You go ahead and sing. And it doesn't help, the church is always going to encourage you. Yeah! Yeah! I'm like, no. But I will say, she's one of the nicest people you will ever meet. She was always like in good spirits anytime you saw her. But my goodness, when it came to singing, sometimes you'd be like, all right, just bring it down a little bit. It's finally the first official rehearsal for the adult choir. And so when I get to the church, the kids choir is still rehearsing because their rehearsal was right before ours. So my brother is in the kids choir now, and he's over there pissed off because he has to sing with the kids. And that day, for some reason, there was like a meltdown with the kids choir. Like Sister Regine is the one who directs the kids choir, and she's gonna stay and also do the adult choir as well. But there's this girl in the choir named Lisa who was supposed to be leading this solo, but she didn't like how she sounds. So right during the middle of their rehearsal, she just storms out and has this whole meltdown. They're like, Lisa, what's wrong with you? And she's like, I wanna sing like Kim! She sings like Beyonce! And I'm like, what is... Okay, all right. Now, Kim is that same girl from Sunday school. And mind you, Kim has a beautiful voice. Probably, I would say she was the best singer in that church. It just ranged for days. I've never heard her hit a bad note. And she was, like I said, she was a lot younger. Just beautiful voice. Rich tone. And she had 2 other sisters, and all of them could sing. And the mom could sing as well. And the father could sing. Maybe because the father was the pastor. Like, all of them, like, that whole family could sing. But Kim had a beautiful voice. So I can understand why Lisa was feeling some kind of way. But anyway, so we start the rehearsal. And I have no idea how I'm going to go about this, because this is not my thing. I have an ear for music. I know how to kind of break things down eventually, but I was still learning my own voice. Like, for years, I was never even confident as a singer myself, which is funny because now I got 2 albums, and even then I'm still not a big confident singer, to be very transparent. But I was like, how do I even do this? And get this, there's also no musicians. I got to do all this by ear. We have a guy that plays the organ, but he doesn't come to rehearsal. He just comes to church, and whenever we sing, he'll fall in if he feels like it, if he feels like coming that day. And so literally all I have is a drummer. And the drummer, this kid Darnell, which is the same boy I told you about that I saw, who was the other teenager. So he was cool. He could play drums and everything. He was Sister Regine's son. So Darnell was cool on the drums, but when you're trying to teach a song, especially with voice, you really don't need the drums until you get to polishing, because at this point, you need everybody to blend. And so the first thing I was trying to do is get everybody to blend and sing together. However, the group of people that I was met with, it was about 9 of us initially starting, and of that 9, maybe 2.5 were actual people who sang, and then the rest were, if you could coach them enough, we can make some magic happen. We can make this work. We can get through this together with a lot of prayer and time and dedication, but unfortunately, nobody wanted to rehearse for more than an hour. And so the first 2 songs that we were doing, because again, with gospel music, there's not really any easy gospel songs to sing when you're first starting out a choir and you don't know much about directing a choir and you don't really have a group of confident singers. You have like what you call the congregation singers, when somebody randomly sings something and people in the seats kind of join in from their seats, but they don't really do too much. That's what I was working with. And so the church also was it was a lot older. Like, a lot of the members were older. So I was like, okay, well, let me at least find some songs that kind of fit what they would most likely want to sing. So we did How Excellent and Going Up Yonder, which I thought would be easy songs to teach. Now let me get into this first rehearsal. To be honest, the ones who worked my nerves the most initially in the beginning had to be my parents. And I don't know if it's because they kind of started the choir, so they felt that they could just always overrule and challenge me on everything, but it worked my nerves, because I remember, like, even in the very beginning, because I already didn't want to do this thing at all, but I was like, listen, if you're gonna have me be the director, you need to let me actually direct it, let me actually do what it is that I do, even though I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but let me do what I'm doing, okay? I'm gonna learn it. It's a process. But I remember even the car ride to the first rehearsal, me and my mom got in this argument because I was explaining to her, like, look, we're gonna need more than 1 hour of rehearsal a week in order to really carry on through Sundays, because it's like y'all only want to rehearse every other Saturday and you want to do 1 hour. And somehow, with the way that the service is set up, the choir would normally sing 2 or 3 times a service. So I'm like, technically that's 6 songs, and you think we're magically gonna be able to have 6 songs ready in 1 hour. My mom would be like, well, y'all just need to sing something normal. You just sing and pick something everybody know, we're gonna be all right. I'm like, that's not how this works. Like, I don't know, in my mother's head, like, she just felt that everybody would just magically go up there and they would just sound like the Georgia Mass Choir or the Tri-City Singers, or everybody, if it was all the women, they were gonna sound like the Clark Sisters. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like, you gotta polish it. And then my father, on the other hand, I remember the first 10 minutes of the rehearsal. I don't know why he thought this was a good idea, but I know he got this from Sister Act 2. Because he sat there, he was talking about, all right, everybody sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I'm looking at him, Dad, fall back, I got this. And of course, Sister Tipper couldn't wait to run up there because she's in the choir. She runs up there, Mer! And my dad was like, nope. I was like, Dad. And really what that was is, my dad was just trying to get his karma back on Sister Tipper, because Sister Tipper always sat directly behind us in church. And she was what you call one of the tambourine players. She had this big old tambourine. And of course, like I said, she was very tall. So if she was feeling the song and she would stand up and she played that tambourine and she was just banging that thing right in your good ear. You be in church and I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So the first song we began to rehearse with was How Excellent. And when I picked the song, I was like, you know what? This is a song that pretty much everybody kind of already would know. And all I would need to do is polish it and bring it all together. And we should be okay, because I was trying to think along the lines of, I only have an hour to somehow teach possibly up to 6 songs. We're probably only gonna get through 2, but I only have an hour, so let's see how this goes. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, we can just, zip right through this in 10 minutes. Boy, was I in over my head. First of all, once we started working on the song, I realized how complex it actually was. Even though there's not a lot of lyrics to remember, the overall delivery of the song requires a lot. First of all, your diction has to be together, because, they put lots of emphasis on the words when you're talking about enunciation. And so even just saying excellent wasn't just excellent, it was excellent. And trying to get them to sing it, some of them like, excellent. Like, no, excellent. And put the t. You need the t. And then in addition to that, you have to have a good ear to be able to, one, sing your part, because the song gets broken down by soprano, alto, and tenor, and all 3 sections are doing something totally different and doing it on a different rhythm. And so in order for it to all come together, you have to be able to stay in key with your part, And in addition to staying in key with your part, you have to be on rhythm because you're going to be singing against what the altos are doing, who will be in a different key and on a different rhythm, who will also be on a different key and a different rhythm from the sopranos, and all, everybody just has to blend together. And so that ended up being the hardest part. And because I was limited with who I was working with, because one, the tenor section alone was enough for a heart attack, because it was just my father and his guy, Brother Amal. And Brother Amal is a little bit older, probably like in his 60s, but he had a hard time maintaining rhythm. And then my father, like I said, you have to guide him through the full song because he loses the key right away. If you're not feeding it to him all the way, for some reason, he has his own ear. And in his ear, he hears something that the rest of us ain't hearing. And he's confident with it too. Loud, strong, and wrong. But so I had that going, and then oh boy, it was stress. And so we're sitting here going through the song, and I'm like, yo, we only got 30 minutes left of rehearsal. Okay, let's just say a prayer and let's move on. So How Excellent went from how excellent to just how about that. To be honest, it wasn't really excellent. It was just that, how about that? How was that one, y'all? And so we move on to the next song just for the sake of time, and we do Going Up Yonder. And so for this one, my mother and Tipper were going to be doing the solos. Like, the minute I said we were doing Going Up Yonder, my mom was like, oh, I'm singing one of the verses. And then Tipper was like, I'm going to sing the other one. I'm like, okay, sure. Because at least they already knew the song. I was like, that might buy some more time because we really got like 28 minutes left of this rehearsal. And on top of that, there were no musicians minus the drummer. Like, Darnell was there on the drums, but you don't really need the drums like that. I mean, you can use it to keep you on tempo, but when you're rehearsing, I need the voices to match first. And so it was killing me because we didn't have the pianist guy. So I had to teach everything by ear. And I do play piano, but at the time, I was not coordinated enough to play, direct, and sing at the same time. That would have been too much for me. So, I'd use the piano just to, hit the key and say, this is the key that you need to sing it in and go from there. But, everything was by ear. We start going over the song, and for some reason, my mom keeps forgetting the words. I'm like, okay, all right, Mama, you're going to have to sing the song like they wrote it. I was turning into Ike Turner in my head. And she's like, I know the song. I played every day on the car to work. Okay, all right. Well, I need you to get the words. I know the words. You don't need to tell me how to sing this. You get... Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Excuse me. And so we keep practicing, and she keeps forgetting the words. I'm like, okay, let's just do this. All right. So Tipper will sing her part. Mom, you'll come in on yours. I'm like, Tipper, if Mom forgets the words or misses a cue, I just want you to come in and support. Just support her, and we should be good. And so the rehearsal goes, and it gets better. It's actually not too bad of a rendition of Going Up Yonder. I'm like, okay, I think there's hope. I just wanted us to be decent enough where I knew my brother would not flame me in the car on the way home. If we could just get to that level, then I knew we were good. And so, we go through the rehearsals. We've practiced for all of an hour and like 8 minutes. I'm on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as how confident I was about how we were going to do Sunday. I was at a 4.5. Now, everybody else in the choir was at like a 9 or 10. Like, they just knew we were about to kill it. And I'm like, boy, listen, I said a prayer that night. I'm like, God, please, just let everything align tomorrow. Please. I'm sorry for all the horrible things I've done thus far in life, but please, if you can just let everything align so we don't sound a mess tomorrow and any other Sunday when I'm directing, we should be good. Amen. And so we get to church, and I'm nervous. I'm over here terrified, like, man, please, because I'm just thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong. And I'm like, please, just let everything come together. I was like, please let there be no visitors today, just in case we suck. Nobody had to see it, minus the folks who already come here every Sunday anyway. Don't let none of my friends magically want to come to my church this day. Like, just, listen, you can let the power go out. Just cancel the service. We can go home. We'll be all right. We don't even got to sing today. Or maybe, like, praise and worship section will be so good that the spirit will hit and the order of the service will be changed around and the choir won't even have to sing because we got to get out because we want to get out on time. Just have your way, God. Amen. So it's our turn to sing, and we do How Excellent. And to be honest, it doesn't go too badly. It goes okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give it about a 5.9-ish, which is better than what I thought we were going to do. I'm like, okay, it wasn't bad. And now, mind you, to the congregation, they thought this was just fine. But for me, as a perfectionist, I'm like, absolutely not. This is just, we got some work to do. So I'm over here mapping out how I was going to rehearse better next time and so on and so on. But it went okay. It wasn't bad. Everybody was kind of in key. It was just, for me, it was uneventful. And then some of that's just the perfectionist in me as well. And so we get through that one. And I guess we did okay because I looked and my brother wasn't laughing in his seat. So I was like, okay, all right. I guess we're doing all right. Then it came time for Going Up Yonder. And What's funny is the musician shows up midway through the service. Now, I ain't seen Homeboy since last Sunday because he wasn't at rehearsal. And so he figures, he's just going to come in there and he'll just play and, we'll just fall in where he comes in. And I'm like, oh, Lord, please don't let this mess us up. Because I'm happy that we have the music, but I also know that I taught it to them one way. And if he plays it in another key, that's going to be suicide unless I can somehow correct everybody. And so I tell him the key that I played it in. He's like, okay, I got you. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Perfect. And so I start going over the song. And the song opens with the solo. The choir doesn't even sing. So it's Tipper who starts out. Tipper, I don't know if the music got her excited or what, but like I said, she likes to remix songs and sing in her own key. So she takes the song, and mind you, at rehearsal, she did it beautifully. Like I ran down the verse with her, and I played the original song for her, and she already knew the song. I thought we were good. Tipper opens her mouth. If you want to know, no, where I'm going. Oh my God, why? And so she kept going, and she feeling where I'm going. I'm like, oh no, why? And soon, I'm like, that is not how we reverse this. And so she's singing, but the church is eating it up. So I'm like, okay, well, just keep singing. And so she gets through her part, and it gets better once she gets to the going up the yonder part. She kind of gets it, and she's found her pocket. She's feeling herself. And another thing is, she sings with her eyes closed. So even if you want to correct her, she can't see you anyway, because she's feeling. Her eyes are closed, so even if she's in the wrong key, if she's on the wrong words, if she came in too early or too late, you can't do nothing about it, because her eyes are closed. And like I said, she's like 6'6". So I'm way down here at 5'7", 5'8". She can't see me anyway if she opens her eyes. Okay, she got to look down. So there's that. Then it's time for my mother to do her verse. Now here's the thing. My mother can actually sing, but my mother is such a fan of people like Patti LaBelle and Natalie Cole and, all of the greats from before my time. And so when she gets the opportunity to sing in front of people, in her head, she's one of these people. Like, she's next to Florence Ballard, and she's up there with Diana Ross, and they're the Supremes. Like, in her head, that's what she turns into. And so they're singing this song. She comes up to the mic, and I don't know if she's singing to God or if she's singing to my dad. Like, I'm like, are you serenading the crowd, or how's this going? And so she sings in this lighthearted feather voice that we did not rehearse with, and I can take the pain. I was like, Mom, that's cute, but you gotta sing out. The mic's not picking you up. The heartaches they break. Mama, sing out. The comforts in knowing I'll soon be gone. And she's like rolling. She got her arms extending all in the air, like she got those Patty arms. She rolling the shoulder. I'm like, Mama, what are you? If God, I said, God. I was like, that was all Patty. God gives me grace. I was like, God, Mama, why? And out of nowhere, while she's singing that, I don't know if Tipper couldn't hear her, because she was singing it extremely light, which, I mean, it sounded nice, but it was so light you couldn't hear it. Out of nowhere, Tipper comes and just finishes the rest of the song. I run this road. I'm like, no, what is y'all doing? And my mama turns and looks at her sideways, and again, Tipper's eyes are closed, so Tipper can't see my mama looking at him. So it's the two of them trying to sing the rest of the song together, and so my mother finally starts to sing out, and now it's the two of them battling it out. I'm like, this is. And at this point, I think people kind of recognize, like, okay, something is a little off here. But again, the church was eating it up. Boy, that first Sunday. Yeah, that whole first Sunday, it was an experience. And so, it didn't go too badly, but it was just, it was a learning experience. And so over time, I become a much better and confident director. And the choir also gets better. And things start to really polish, and, we kind of find our pocket as a group, and a few people actually join the choir. And so for like the next year, it's kind of fun. I have a good time doing it, actually. I actually look forward to directing, and it becomes like this fun experience, and it helps me to learn my own voice, as well as like getting a better ear and learning how to bring people together to sing. So it's a cool experience. But then there's a sudden shift, because guess what? I have to go to college, something I've been counting down for like the last year and a half. So I'm going to kind of zip through the next 4 years for the sake of time. But just know, I go to Howard, of course, and Howard is a great experience. But the thing is, while I'm at Howard, I don't really go to church. I can probably count on two hands how many times I went to church while I was at Howard. There was this one time my aunt magically had her church bring a shuttle to my dorm to pick me up for church, and I didn't know they were coming. And mind you, I had just came from the club at 4 o'clock, and it's 7 o'clock, and the people are outside talking about sunrise service, because I think it was Easter. And I'm like, yeah, your Aunt Queen, she said you needed a church service to come to. We're outside. And I'm like, oh, what? Is that what? Oh, okay. And so I remember I went to church that one time. I went a few more times. My friend Tana Mae was the one who usually dragged me to church, because she'd make me go to this church called Reed Temple, and you'd get on the little church shuttle and go. And again, like, I was not pressed to go to church in college. I was sleeping in every day, and I was also on my own journey spiritually anyway, so I really wasn't even pressed to go to church like that. And then my former boss, Keeney, if you remember from my Howard University episodes, she was a minister at this church in Temple Hills called Community of Hope AME. Now, I did like going to that church because they had a go-go band, and the music was extremely, like, just very live, like lots of instrumentation, and the music was just a straight celebration. So I absolutely loved going to that church because the music was so good. And to be honest, Reed Temple had good music, and I went to a church called where else did I go to? Ebenezer, of course, had great music, and so all of that was fun, but I was not really in church like that. So we fast forward. College is over, and mind you, I did come home a few times for Christmas and, the summer, but I wasn't really in the choir during those time periods. Or if I was in the choir, I wasn't the director. Sister Regine was the director while I was gone, and so I would just come in and I would fall back and let her take the lead. It wasn't like I'd be gone for college and come back and take over. Like, she had the choir, it was hers. And so go through those 4 years, and I graduate, and now I'm back in Spanaway because, of course, things, if you've listened to the very first episode of the podcast, things didn't go too well initially coming out of Howard. 1, it's the peak of the recession. 2, there were some things I could have done a bit better. And 3, my father was sick anyway, and then my grandma died, and there was just a lot going on. So I was like, let me just go home. And so I'm at home, and now I'm back in Spanaway. Now, here's the thing. I hadn't been to Spanaway for 2 years. I stopped coming home after my sophomore year because my junior year and senior year, I'd always go to Savannah during the holidays. And during the summers, I was the summer before my senior year, I was working at Howard. So I hadn't even been home like that since about 2008. It's now 2010. And now I'm trying to adjust to life after college. And that can be an adjustment when you've had those freedoms to kind of be on your own and do your own thing and come and go as you please, and now you're back in your parents' house. And not only are you back in your parents' house, but it's kind of like, it's almost like you hit the rewind button and it's back to just same old, the same kind of rules, and you're gonna do this and y'all gotta go to church together. And yeah, it was just really an adjustment, on top of the fact that you're going from a place like Washington DC that has everything, and it's in close proximity to other major metropolitan cities like New York and Philly and Baltimore, and there's just so much to do. And to go from that all the way back to your humble beginnings of the nice military farm town suburb that you grew up in, where there's deer that walk across the street, and some streets don't even have street lights, so it's pitch black, so you better have your high beams on. Going back to that was an adjustment. Even going back to my parents' church was an adjustment because, like I said, I've gone to all these much larger churches in DC that, the music was good, and they had like gospel, like Kurt Carr was, I think, the music director at Ebenezer, and it was Brittany. I don't think Brittany Wright was at Community of Hope yet, but like there was a bunch of people who were like big gospel singers and stuff who went to some of these churches that I would sometimes go to in college. And so going from that to back to my humble storefront church, I'm like, oh, woo, okay, I've lived a little. And so we fast forward, and I'm back in the choir. And I was also on just my own journey in life as well. I was getting a taste of humble pie and letting the world teach me the lessons of humility. And so, I was in the choir, and it was one of the things I actually looked forward to doing, because at this point I was unemployed. My social life was a little awkward. There was a few friendships and stuff that had kind of fallen apart. And like I said, with my grandma passing, my family structure had shifted where everybody was no longer getting along. And then my father was getting progressively sicker, and it was a lot going on. So the choir was kind of like an escapism. But at this point, I'm not the director. It's Sister Regine. And so I actually enjoyed being in the choir as opposed to directing, because I didn't have the pressure of like, if everything falls apart, everybody's gonna look at me crazy. And so I was fine with that. So I didn't mind singing. At this point, Sister Regine has merged the kids choir and the adult choir into one choir, which I actually thought was a very smart idea, because to be honest, the kids sang better than the adults, so they kind of helped the adults out by merging the choirs. And now this meant that Kim, who was, the pastor's daughter, who was that same little girl who I thought was 10 when I first came, now she's, I don't know, 15 or 16 or something, and like beautiful voice. So I'm like, okay, yeah, they can definitely use her. And then Kim has 2 other sisters that sing as well. The pastor's wife has joined the choir, so she has a great voice. There's a few other people who joined. My father's no longer in the choir because of his lung condition, so he had to step down. My mother is no longer in the choir because she's doing more of the ministry stuff. And so the choir is actually a lot of fun, but the funniest bit is Sister Regine and I had 2 totally different styles. And she used to crack me up at that rehearsal because some of the stuff that she would do, I'm like, wait, what? I remember one time we were supposed to sing something, and so the tenor section now, because Brother Abdul is no longer in the tenor section either. It was me, my brother, who's now 14 or 15, and then these 2 boys who were her sons, Sister Regine's sons. And so we were getting ready to sing some song, and I'm like, hey, what's our key? And then her son goes, deep. Huh? What'd you say? Deep. What do you mean deep? And my brother goes, oh yeah, so none of the tenors can actually sing except for me, so she tells them to sing deep and just sing really low so nobody can hear them, and then I just carry the section. Oh, okay. All right. And so I guess you 2 mumble and me and my brother will take care of it. Okay, fine by me. And really what it was is she was forcing the 2 sons to be in the choir because they didn't really like to sing. But of course, like I said, you go to one of those smaller churches, everybody's going to find something they got to participate in. And so they did not like singing, but she forced them to be up there and sing. Hilarious. So we rolled with the punches when it came to that choir. And actually, the choir had gotten really, they're actually pretty decent because I will say she was a great director. I think my ear, I'm not going to lie, I think our ears were different. We heard things differently. So sometimes she and I would clash, but I was trying to be respectful because she was the director and not myself. And again, it had been 4 years since I was in charge, so I had to take some humble pie and let her lead on. But she would always get me back when it was time for solos because, like I said, I had a softer voice. And I remember one time we had to sing God Is, because I think it was like Easter service or something. And God Is, by the way, is one of my favorite gospel songs. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's a throwback song, but I absolutely love the words and I love the delivery of that song. And there's some songs that just talk to me. That's one of those songs. And so I was selected to be the second soloist in the song. I think I want to say the pastor's wife was singing the first part and I was supposed to come in and do the second half. And so, I'm going to do mine and what did I say? My joy in the times of sorrow. And she was like, Michael, pain. I'm like, excuse me? Pain. You don't sing with pain. You need to sing with pain. And I'm like, okay, do it again. Okay. My joy in the times of sorrow. Michael, pain. Listen to me. My joy in the time. I'm like, look, I ain't about to be. Maybe I was looking at her so sideways. I was like, look, you working my nerves here. You do the dang solo. She used to put me to work because I did not like singing out at the time. And I remember one time we did Leaning on the Everlasting Arm. And I had to do the solo, and at first I was like way in the bottom. Like, you want sunshine on a cloudy day. And she was like, Michael, no. I said pain, and bring it up. You're too low. I'm like, I'm too low. Bring it up. Okay. You want sunshine on a cloudy day. Michael, pain. I'm like, you miss pain, woman. I'm not in pain. Sing it out. I'm like, okay. By the time I got it to where she wanted it to be, she had me singing that song so high. I was so pissed at her. I was mad. And so I'm over here singing about sunshine on a cloudy day, and the look on my face is just like death, darkness. It was such a funny dynamic. And while I was at Howard, I really spent a lot of time working on just my ear and everything. I didn't expect to ever be a choir director again, but I really just loved music. And because I wanted to work in music, and my childhood friend from home and I had been doing music, like we had started our own mini production company, and they would create all of these tracks, and then I would write to the tracks and create the arrangements and the vocals and everything. And so I started really learning how to blend and how to, really layer and harmonize and do all that properly, and understanding what resonance was and sustainability, and having a better understanding of diction, and having a better understanding of, what a vibrato does, and when you're blending, why you don't want too much vibrato, because you don't want to sound like the senior citizens reunion choir. And, so learning all of that. So I came back with like this wealth of knowledge, and I had been working on it. So, sometimes Sister Regine and I would butt heads on occasion, and it would be hilarious. And then anytime that, she wasn't able to direct that Sunday or something, maybe she was on vacation, I would fill in. And one of the things that would happen is, it was almost like there were two different choirs. She was really good with the choir, and the choir was really good. But when I would direct, the choir was also really good, but it was a different kind of good. So it was like two different versions of good, and it kind of just depended on what you were into. Now, I'm not gonna lie, at this time I personally was still making some very poor choices, and I will always remember this time. We had to sing at this other church, and this church was in Seattle. It was a much bigger church. Like, it was a church that probably had like 2,000 or 3,000 members, and we were singing My Name is Victory, and that was the song I would normally lead. And I'm not gonna lie, the night before, I partied, had a great time, because, hey, I'm 21, I'm living, and I got wasted, super wasted, so I'm barely functioning. And we get to this church, and I've sang this song a million times. There were some songs that they were always my go-to song to sing. They'd always have me lead that one. And so we're up there singing it, and we're doing the opening, and it's going smoothly. It's we sound beautiful. Now, she's directing. I'm just singing the solo. And, I'm up there confident. I'm like, oh, this is a big crowd. We finally get to sing in front of some folks. Because, at our church, you sing in front of about 20 people. That gets boring after a while. So when you get to do it in front of, a bigger group, oh, yeah. Man, as soon as I open my mouth, my voice just let out this croak like a god. I'm like, what? Oh, my God. What just happened? In my head, oh my God. And so I'm like, okay, I keep singing, and then I do it again, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I crack again. I'm like, what is going on? And Regina's looking at me like, this is not the time for your voice to want to give out. And my brother's like, Michael, what are you doing? I'm like, and I don't know, son, it ain't coming out. And so it was horrible. I was so mad at myself because the choir actually sounded really good, and it was me that messed up the whole thing. I was like, ooh, that's karma for all that trash you talk about, folks. But I was so mad because, like, literally, my voice cleaned up by the time I got to the second verse, and we got to the end. It was fine. But that first half of the song, my voice was like, nah, we don't want to sing today. No, we don't want to do it. No, you're on your own. Figure it out. And so, it was horrible. And it was funny because it was like, church folks are already church folks can be very judgmental musically. And so it's almost like all of the churches have this indirect competition with each other when another church brings their choir to sing. So, of course, all of the other churches' choir folks are looking at me like, oh, okay, this is all they got, huh? Okay, that's what they do down in Spanaway. I was like, I was so mad. And then, the funniest time I remember, I was so mad. I wanted to fight the whole choir. We had to sing in Puyallup for this church's anniversary service. It was some church, and I think they had like 1,500 members, so it was a bigger church, of course. And I wanted to make sure we did not mess this up, because this time I was going to be directing. And at this point, Sister Regina and I kept trading off as far as directing, and she was kind of stepping down a little bit because she was doing some other things, so she didn't have the same amount of time to dedicate to directing. So sometimes I'd be directing, sometimes she would, and it was like a 50-50. And closer to the time that I got ready to move back to DC for my job, it was more like I was at like 80 and she was at 20. But I just wanted it to be right. And so that Saturday, we rehearsed that song. We did the song Even Me. I think it was called Even Me. And I was like, we're not leaving until we get this right, because our musician wasn't at rehearsal, so I had to teach it to everybody by ear, and I had to really make sure everybody had the blend perfect. And it sounded so good at rehearsal. And really, that was one of the days we actually had a real rehearsal. We were there for 2 hours just for that song. And it was beautiful. Like, the kids had their part good, the adults were good on theirs, all the sopranos, the tenors, the altos, perfect. I was like, thank you. Okay, I'm ready. We're gonna kill this. We get to that church the next day and everything, and I'm giving everybody the keys before we start. I'm like, okay, sopranos, y'all, alto, tenors, that's the key, put it together. And then the musicians at that church were like, oh, okay, we can join in. So they start playing it. I'm like, oh, good, we got some extra help. And so everything is going smoothly. They sound beautiful. I'm like, you go, boy. Sometimes you gotta pat yourself on the back. You go, boy. And so I'm doing the thing, and then it gets to the part where you have to break down the song by sections. And so the sopranos start doing their part, because the sopranos are going to do their part, and then the altos come in, and then the tenors. Now, if you've ever grown up in like the black church, everybody knows when you break down the sections, the audience always gives the best reception to the tenors and the sopranos, and unfortunately the altos, because they usually carry the melody, the altos didn't get, okay, that was cool. But I remember being a kid, in the tenor section when I was like 6, and we used to think it was so cool, because as soon as we would open our mouth and sing whatever we sang, everybody, yeah, we thought we were so cool. And then of course the sopranos, they would always get a big reception too. But so the sopranos are doing their part, the church is, yeah, sing, yeah, woo, and I'm in here like, we are killing this. And then we get to those altos, and the alto section this day is the pastor's wife, one of the pastor's daughters, and Sister Tipper. Tipper. So Tippa sings with her eyes closed. And so, I get mad. So the sopranos are doing their part. It's time for the altos to come in, because the altos are going to come in as the sopranos are singing, but the altos are going to be singing in a different key to a different tempo with different words, but it's going to complement what the sopranos are singing, and it's going to sound good together, blended, and then the tenors will do the same thing. We get to those altos, and Tippa's eyes are closed, and she comes in early and off beat, and on top of that, one of the other altos is in the wrong key. And so the altos are singing in two different keys on multiple rhythms and tempos, and it's messing up the sopranos, and I can't even bring in the tenors yet until we clean up the sopranos and the altos, because it's just gonna be more discombobulated and it'd be a disaster. And so I have the tenors on pause. They're just kind of standing there rocking, and my brother, and like at this point I think we had like 5 tenors that day. The tenors, they're all just kind of like smiling because they know I'm flustered in the director spot, because behind me is 1,500 people and in front of me is a choir of about 20 people, and they sound a hot mess at the moment when we were just doing so well. And so I'm trying to get Tippa to stop singing. And so as a director, when you need a choir to like stop singing, you close your fist. And so I'm closing my fist like aggressively, like close. But Tippa can't see because her eyes are closed. And I'm looking at the other altos like, elbow her, tell her to stop. Because what I was gonna do was I was gonna get the altos to just stop singing. I was gonna clean up the sopranos, and then I was gonna actually bring in the tenors and then bring in the altos in last. And that was because you got to be quick on your feet too when you're directing. Sometimes when a song isn't going well, you have to make adjustments. I'll always remember this one time. We were singing this one song. We were singing, what was it? I'll Make It. It's like a throwback Hezekiah Walker song. My brother was leading it. My brother does not like to sing up or sing out. He likes to sing in this low pocket. And so I remember I had already taught the song to the choir in one key, and as soon as he started his verse, he dropped the key on his own. And I mean, he still sounded fine, but I'm like, what, Marcus? You can't. You either modulate up or you don't change key. In gospel, you just go up and stay up, or you stay in that pocket. It's weird if you go back down without it like flowing into going to a lower key. And so I remember he did that, and then I had to figure out how to bring the choir back up to the right key because they hadn't rehearsed it in the key that he's singing in, and I knew it was gonna be a disaster, but somehow I was able to pull it off. Anyway, going back to this song at this church, and so I'm cueing the altos to just stop, and I'm like, and now they're like looking at me crazy. I'm like, just stop singing. And so literally, I turn around and look at the congregation like, don't worry, we about to fix this, y'all. Give us a minute. And so I literally walk up to Tippa like, stop. And so I get her to finally stop. And we try this again. Sopranos come in, sopranos are doing their part, and at this point, the sopranos are tired of singing that part. You know, you can only sing at the top of your range for so long before your voice gets tired. And then, you know, I bring in the tenors. Sopranos and the tenors are cool. All right, let's bring in these altos. Altos come in again on the wrong key and at the wrong tempo. I have to stop them again. I was like, dang, man. And so I just mute the altos. I'm like, just don't sing it all. So I start singing the alto part as loud as I can so it can get to them and they can hear it. And I'm like, and I keep pointing to my chest like, mirror what I'm doing. Copy me. And so finally, we get it right. But at that point, the magic had already waned off. And that song was only supposed to be like 4 minutes. We were up there for like 8 minutes because I was not stepping down until we had it right. Like, that was my ego and everything in a way. Yeah, I was so mad. Oh, I was mad. And then to make it even funnier, Regine was going to direct the next song we were supposed to sing. But I was so mad. I was like, I don't even want to sing no more. I was pissed. But I still went up there and sang. And why did the choir just totally kill that song? Killed it. I was like, really? And that wasn't even the song we rehearsed. I was like, y'all got to be kidding me. I was hot. Ooh. But to be honest, I feel like that was just the karma for some of the choices I had been making, because I definitely had been still like partying really hard. And sometimes I would come to choir rehearsal hungover. Or, you know, I still had leftover liquor in my system. And I remember one time, because this is how much of a square I was in college. I didn't really drink in college until senior year. And even then, I always knew my limitations and I would never really go too far. So I never got sick to the point where I had to throw up or anything. You know, I never blacked out. I never got in a bar fight or nothing crazy like that. But when I got back home, I think because I was in a space where I didn't know what was next, and it was the first time I was not in control of a situation, and the world and life were teaching me a lesson. I was like, well, shoot, the heck with it. And so I remember we went to this place, Lady Luck. I got just straight wasted. I had shots and mixed the light liquor with the dark liquor and put this in and over. What's the proof on that? Yeah. And great time until about 4 a.m. hit, and then your stomach started hurting and your head was spinning and you couldn't see straight. And I couldn't drive home, so I had to sleep in my car. And then like eventually one of my friends was like, where are you at? And I'm like, oh, I'm in the parking lot in my car. I'm just gonna sleep here till the morning, because I knew not to drive. I wasn't crazy. That's the one thing. I feel like with alcohol, for me, maybe it's just me, but when I've gotten to that point where I've had way too much, I've even always known then right from wrong. Like I knew, okay, don't drive because you clearly are not functioning. Like I still knew right from wrong, so I knew not to drive. My friends were like, oh, well, what are you going to do? I was like, well, look, y'all can drive me home in my car if you want to do that, because I got to, I have rehearsal in the morning. And so, I get home, and we go to rehearsal. That was the most painful rehearsal. That's the one day all the musicians want to be there. So the drums are cranking. I'm like, ooh. All right, organ was cranking. Like, every sound is amplified when you hungover and everything hurts. And then the choir, Tipper got the tambourine. She I'm like, ooh, oh. Boy, that was the quickest rehearsal. I was like, we're going to sing something real subtle and soft today. So I was like, maybe that's just the karma. But, with the choir, I had so much fun. And there were some really great Sundays as well, too. We had some really great moments where, like, the choir just, I don't know, it was a learning lesson or a learning opportunity. And, over time, I learned, like, the art of patience, and I really started to understand voice. And, like, the choir got really good, especially when it came to blending. Because, like I said, we were so used to rehearsing without music that they all learned each other's voices and learned what worked and what didn't. And so, like, those last 6 months that I was still home and Sister Regina and I were going back and forth with directing, the choir used to just start killing it. And then it started, you started to see a shift. And then, even the membership in the church started to grow. And then we kept getting invited to, sing at other churches, which I was always nervous about, because I'm always like, are we really that good? Okay, all right, sure. And so it was a great experience. And I definitely credit my experience as a director with just even my own music and a lot of things as far as just understanding voice. I don't think I'm the best singer in the world. I don't even think I can sit at a table with most singers, but my ear, is pretty good. And so I really appreciate those moments. Plus, I had so much fun too. It was a lot of fun, lots of laughs, and really it started to come together once I made some different choices about just life and how I would go about doing things. Because for some reason it was eating me alive that, okay, you're the choir director, but you were hungover for half the rehearsals. You can't be one step from an alcoholic and trying to direct a choir. It's no. So I started making an effort to change what I did socially and really, and even with that, changing my attitude, not being so freaking cocky and just being more supportive of everybody and everything. And that's when things really came together, even with the choir. That's when the choir really got better, was when I was really 100% invested in it, and it wasn't just something okay, I'm doing you people a favor. And it's crazy because literally as it got towards the end, because I ended up getting my job that I currently have and I was going to move back to DC, I almost was sad to go. After all of that time in Spanaway, because I didn't want to, be there, because, I was just trying to be in DC. Towards the end, I almost didn't even want to leave, because I finally had found, my lane in my pocket, and I had so much. It wasn't even just about the choir being fun, but I think there was definitely a connection I made with the music that we were singing, because, again, there was so much going on, especially, watching my dad get sicker and sicker and sicker. Sometimes that music was my therapy. And I always loved just the complexity of gospel music. I always remember, I think the hardest song we ever did was Milton Brunson's Available to You. And it's hard because at the end, there's a portion where, the sopranos, the tenors, and the altos, they go into their separate parts. But you literally have to, you have to just listen, because it's so hard to catch what they're doing, because they're not singing any words. All they're doing is saying but they're doing it in different ways. And the tenors and the altos, their section almost mirrors each other, and you can barely decipher which section is doing what. And I remember I sat in my room with that song on repeat for 2 hours trying to figure out the pieces. And then I'd bring my brother in. I'm like, Marcus, sing this part just like this. That was the cool thing, having Marcus there. He was my guinea pig, because I'd be like, Marcus, sing this piece. Because whenever I needed to do all 3 parts and I needed to practice it at home, I'd have Marcus sing the tenor piece, then I'd have this little tape recorder in my hand, and I would record like the soprano part in falsetto on a tape recorder, and then I would sing the alto part, and then I'd play that and he'd sing and I'd sing, and that's how I'd always go over all the breakdowns. And so available to you, just when we actually did it, it was just magical, because man, I don't know, I had worked so hard on it, and it wasn't even about me at this point. It was really just I knew that if it could be presented the right way, it could be like really powerful, and it was when we did it. And then there were a bunch of other songs that really just, they just came together, and I had such a great time doing it. There were so many lessons learned, and I don't really do choir related stuff anymore. Every now and then there's an opportunity that comes. Like this one time I did this music conference with like the Fairfax County Public Schools, and it was kind of cool because it was an all boys choir, like middle schoolers and high schoolers, and it was cool because it was like 150 kids. And somehow I was just in the right place at the right time. I was at this community event, and this woman who happened to be the music teacher at like the middle school in the area was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody who knows gospel music because I want to add them to my workshop. And I'm like, okay. And I wasn't planning on doing it. I was just going to put in a reference. She was like, I feel like you can do it. I was like, oh, okay. And so it was cool. Like I taught these kids. It was magical because like to hear like 150 like voices singing back to you, I mean, it was awesome. And then I've been fortunate enough to co-direct like 2 shows at the Kennedy Center, which was interesting. But it was cool at the same time because it was like, there was like the, what's the name of the school? I want to say it's the Duke Ellington School of Music kids. Like they were doing one piece, and then I had some of the kids from my organization in like a separate choir. And so my job was to direct the kids that were in my organization, and they had to compliment and sing with the kids from the Duke Ellington School of Music. And this was for like an event on the Millennium Stage during the summer. And then there was also like a holiday event. So it's cool, and I enjoy it. Would I go back to being a choir director? I don't know. I think, that's a good question. I don't know. If the opportunity presented itself, because there have been some, but I've turned them down, mainly because most churches, if they want a choir director, they want you to also be able to like play and everything. And I do have my ear for music, and I can play instruments, but I don't think I'm strong enough to direct and play at the same time. And a lot of the bigger churches want you to also know how to read music, and I can only do everything by ear. That's one of the downsides to when you've never had any training in any of your talents, whether it's dance or comedy or music or all of that. It's all been kind of self-taught, but it was a great experience. I definitely enjoyed it. It's one of the highlights that come out of those last years, as far as being around my father and being around my family, with my family dynamic as far as the 4 of us, because after I moved back to DC, that dynamic was never the same, and then things happened, and now all of us live in different parts of the country, and my father's no longer here, and it's different. But I always have an appreciation for gospel music. I absolutely love it. I don't talk about it as much on the channel as I would like to, but yeah, gospel music just definitely, my ear, part of it comes from gospel. So it's been a great experience, and yeah, we will see you all on the next podcast.